Hello students, let us start with the next chapter of science, that is reproduction in plants. In this chapter, we are going to learn about different modes of reproduction, that is sexual and asexual. In asexual reproduction, we will learn about vegetative propagation, budding, fragmentation and spore formation. In sexual reproduction, we will learn about different parts of flowers and how stamen and pistil and other parts play a role in this reproduction. We'll also learn about pollination and fertilization. In fertilization, we will concentrate on fruit and seed formation as well as seed dispersal. In order to understand about plant reproduction, we first need to understand the parts of the plant. The parts of the plant are very simple. The part that we see above the ground is called the shoot system, and the part that we see below the ground is called the root system. The shoot system includes flower, leaf, fruit, and stem, while the root system has the roots. Let us first understand what is reproduction. Reproduction is the production of new individuals from their parents. The species of the same organisms need to mate together to reproduce a new offspring. There are two types of parts in a plant, vegetative parts and the reproductive parts. Vegetative parts of the plant are root, stem and leaves, and the reproductive part of the plant are flowers. In plants, there are two types of reproduction. They are asexual and sexual. Asexual is the type of reproduction which occurs without the help of seeds. Whereas sexual reproduction is a type of reproduction in which new plants are produced from seeds. So in the plant, asexual reproduction can be done by different methods, and these methods are vegetative propagation, budding, fragmentation and spore formation. We'll learn about all these methods in this chapter. Let us first understand what is vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is an asexual reproduction method. In this method, new plants are produced from vegetative parts, that is, roots, stems, or leaves. Since reproduction is through these parts, which are the vegetative part, the method is called vegetative reproduction or vegetative propagation method. We observe this method in various types of plants, that is rose, money plant, potato plants, cactus. All of these can reproduce with their vegetative parts. Let us look at an activity to understand this method a little better. If we take a stem of a rose and put it in the soil and provide it with proper nutrients and water, we see that the stem will grow into a whole new plant. Now notice here that seeds are not involved and we get a whole new plant from a stem. So this is an example of vegetative reproduction. If we look at a potato carefully, then we see that there are various scars on it. There are various buds in them, and these scars are called the eyes. Now, in order to perform this activity, we need to cut a few pieces of this eye and we need to bury them in soil. We need to water the pieces regularly for a few days and we need to see what happens after that. We generally observe that a whole new plant grows out of it. So this is another example of vegetative reproduction. Let us understand the other method of reproduction, that is budding. This is also an asexual method. So in this method, a small projection called a bud is formed on the yeast cell. You can see it in the picture. The projection is outside the yeast cell. So this bud grows and becomes a new yeast cell. When it matures, it falls off and this new yeast cell then grows and produces more yeast cells. So in this way, the yeast multiplies. So with the help of this budding, the yeast cell can produce multiple yeast cells. First, the bud develops from a single yeast cell. Then this new bud develops into a chain of buds and then we have multiple yeast cells. Let us understand the third method of reproduction, that is fragmentation. In this method, the plant breaks up into two or more fragments and each fragment grows into a new plant. As the name suggests, fragments grow into new plants, so that's why it's called fragmentation. This is generally observed in Spirogyra. You can see in the picture how one Spirogyra breaks up into the fragments and each of this fragment will develop into a new organism. The next asexual reproduction method that we will study is spore formation. Spores are reproductive structures which help to protect the plant during extreme conditions. So if there is extreme winter, extreme rain or extreme temperature, then these spores will act as a shield. So in this method, fungus produces spores and these spores will germinate to produce new plants. We see rhizoids here in fungus instead of fruits. So here also, instead of seeds, there are spores which play a role in reproduction. Hence, this is an asexual method of reproduction. Now we will learn about the sexual reproduction method. So in order to understand sexual reproduction, let us first understand the reproductive parts of a plant. So as we have already learned that flowers are the reproductive parts of the plant. Stamen is the male reproductive part and the pistil is the female reproductive part. Based on the presence of these reproductive parts, the flowers can be unisexual or bisexual. Flowers which have only the stamen or only the pistil are called unisexual flowers. Maize, papaya, cucumber are example of these. Flowers can be bisexual also. So these flowers have both stamen and pistil present in them and hence they are bisexual. Example, rose, mustard, petunia. The transfer of pollen grains from the male part of the flower, that is anther, to female part of the flower, that is stigma, is called pollination. Pollen grains are transferred by various agents of pollination. So this could be wind, water, or insects. Now, we need to understand how does this pollination occur. So a pollen grain from the anther is produced and it is transferred to stigma by either agent of the pollination. If the pollen grain lands on the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination, and if the pollen grain lands on the stigma of another flower, then it is called cross-pollination. Once this pollen grain lands on the stigma, the aim of the pollen grain is to fuse with the female gamete which is inside the ovule. In order to reach this female gamete, there is a formation of a pollen tube through which the pollen grain reaches the female gamete. Once it reaches there, the male gamete and the female gamete fuse together to form a zygote, and this is called fertilization. Now, after fertilization, that zygote develops into an embryo. From the embryo, we have further development. Now, the need for all the reproductive parts is not there because fertilization has already occurred. So, the ovule then develops into a seed and the ovary develops into a fruit. So, after fertilization, as we saw, the ovary enlarges to form fruit and the ovules become tiny seeds. The petals, sepals, and the other parts of the flower are not required because the role is already completed. The role of the petal was to attract the insects to the flowers. The sepals were to protect the birds. All this is already finished because fertilization has occurred. So petals, sepals, and other parts usually dry up and fall off. We studied about various agents of pollination. Now, this carrying away of seeds from one place to another by these agents of pollination is called dispersal of seeds. So, seeds are dispersed by wind, water, and animals. Seed dispersal is very important because seeds should not crowd around over a one particular area. If they crowd around over one area, then they will keep competing for nutrients, sunlight, and other things. So, seed dispersal is important for proper growth of plants. Let's summarize about what we have learned in this chapter. We have learned that all organisms reproduce their own kind. We have learned about different methods of asexual reproductions like vegetative propagation, budding, fragmentation, and spore formation. We have then learned about sexual reproduction and how it involves fusion of male and female gametes. Flower is the reproductive part of the plant. Pollination is the process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of same flower or another flower. We have learned about agents of pollination. That is, pollination can be done by wind, water, insects, and animal. We have also learned about fertilization and how fertilization is the fusion of male and female gametes. At the end, we have learned about seed dispersal and how seed dispersal is occurring with the help of wind, water, and animals, and how it is important for proper development of a plant. I hope you all understood this chapter properly. Thank you.